The wedding hall was glowing with light, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. It was supposed to be our happiest day, a celebration of love, loyalty, and the life I thought I had built with the man I trusted most. But as the music faded into the background, I felt a sudden pull in the air, a tension I couldn't quite name. My best friend, the one who had stood by my side since childhood, walked into the room. She smiled at me, but there was something behind her eyes, something sharp, almost mocking. Then, in the middle of the celebration, I overheard it, a whisper, a cruel, cutting whisper that sliced through the joy like a knife. She doesn't even know. He was with me the night before their engagement. My heart stopped. My hands went cold around the glass I was holding. I wanted to believe it was just drunken gossip, a mistake, a misunderstanding. But when I turned, I saw the way my husband's face froze. His smile faltered, just for a second, but enough for me to see the truth burning in his eyes. The ground beneath me seemed to collapse. My wedding, my future, my trust, it all turned to ashes in an instant. Yet, even as my chest tightened and my throat burned with betrayal, a new thought pierced through the pain. This was not going to be the end of me. This was the beginning of something else, something stronger. Because if they thought I would bow my head in silence, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I forced myself to smile, to keep dancing, to play the role of the glowing bride everyone expected me to be. But inside, my world was collapsing. Every cheer, every laugh, every toast to love and loyalty felt like knives twisting in my chest. I kept glancing at my husband, searching his eyes for denial, for some sign that the whisper was just a cruel lie. Instead, I saw the way he avoided my gaze. He laughed too loudly with the guests, held his glass too tightly, and every time my best friend leaned in close to whisper something, his shoulders tensed, like he knew I was watching. The betrayal wasn't just in the past. It was happening right there in front of me, in the middle of my wedding. At one point, she caught me staring. Her lips curled into a smirk so faint, so deliberate, that my stomach churned. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a game. She wanted me to know, but not enough for anyone else to notice. And that's when it hit me. They hadn't just betrayed me, they were mocking me. I excused myself, slipping into the quiet of the bathroom, my dress heavy, my breath uneven. I stared into the mirror, the tears threatening to spill, but I stopped them. No, I whispered to myself. Not here, not now. If they wanted to see me break, they'd have to wait, because I was going to find the truth. And when I did, I wouldn't just expose them, I'd burn their carefully built lies to the ground. The party raged on outside, but I returned with my mask firmly in place. I laughed, I toasted, I danced, yet every move was calculated, every glance sharp. They thought I was broken. They thought I'd collapse quietly and let their secret rot inside me. They didn't know who they were dealing with. That night, after the last guest left and the lights dimmed, I pretended to sleep beside my new husband, but my heart pounded too loud to ignore. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a faint glow lighting up the room. I reached for it with trembling fingers. The passcode? His birthday. Predictable. And there it was. Message after message, my best friend's name at the top. Hidden beneath sweet emojis and casual words, I found fragments of their truth. No one suspects a thing. She's so naive. Tonight was perfect. I wish it was us up there. Every word cut deeper than a knife. My chest burned as I scrolled further, my breath uneven. They had been planning this for months. While I chose flowers, they whispered plans. While I wrote vows, they exchanged lies. I clutched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. But instead of screaming, I snapped the screen off, slid it back, and lay down. Because at that moment, rage turned into something sharper. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want just an argument. I wanted them exposed, publicly, undeniably, so that neither could crawl away from the wreckage. That night, as I stared at the ceiling, one thought echoed louder than all the others. They think they've outsmarted me, but I will make them regret ever crossing me. I woke the next morning with a heaviness in my chest, but it wasn't sorrow anymore. It was clarity. The night before, I had read enough messages to know the truth. The betrayal wasn't a moment of weakness. It wasn't a slip. It was deliberate, planned, and ongoing. And if they thought I would simply walk away quietly, they were wrong. At breakfast, my husband sat across from me, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. He smiled, asked about my plans for the day, kissed my cheek as if the vows he had spoken weren't poison on his tongue. I nodded, replied softly, even laughed when appropriate. My best friend texted me, pretending nothing was wrong, asking if I wanted to meet for lunch. I said yes, because this wasn't going to end in silence. This was going to end in a storm. That afternoon, we sat across from each other in the cafe we'd been going to for years. She wore her usual bright smile, acting the role of the supportive friend. "You looked so beautiful yesterday," she said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. I looked into her eyes, and for a moment the weight of our history crushed me. The sleepovers, the secrets, the promises we'd made as children. She had been the sister I never had. But now, she was my enemy. I forced a smile. "Thank you," I said softly. "It really meant a lot to see you there." She had no idea I already knew everything. And that ignorance gave me power. Over the next days, I became an actress in my own life. I laughed with my husband, planned dinners with my best friend, and played the role of the clueless bride. But beneath the surface, every detail was carefully calculated. First, I copied every message from his phone, screenshots saved discreetly to a hidden folder. Conversations, photos, times, dates, proof. Then I checked her social media, her subtle hints and late-night posts, cross-referencing them with his excuses. It all aligned perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle spelling out betrayal. But proof alone wasn't enough. Proof would only give me closure. What I wanted was humiliation, the same humiliation they had crafted for me. So I began to plan their downfall in public, where their lies couldn't be hidden behind whispers. The opportunity came sooner than expected. My husband's family was planning a large dinner in our honor, a celebration of the wedding. Invitations had already been sent, and everyone who mattered would be there. Relatives, friends, business connections. A perfect stage. That night, while my husband slept, I sat at the desk with my laptop glowing in the dark. My hand shook, but not from fear. This was adrenaline. I created a simple slideshow, nothing fancy, just screenshots of their conversations, one after another, each more damning than the last. Sweet words, secret meetings, promises they had no right to make. I added timestamps. I added context. I made sure every detail was impossible to deny. And then I prepared my weapon. A USB drive labeled with a single word: truth. But there was one more step. If I simply exposed them, people might pity me. They might whisper behind closed doors, shaking their heads at my tragedy. I didn't want pity. I wanted power. So I decided to flip the narrative. Instead of being the betrayed bride, I would become the one in control, the one who knew, who endured, who struck when the moment was right. Over the next week, I trained my face to betray nothing. I laughed with my husband, planned dinners with my best friend, and even accepted her offer to go shopping together. She held dresses against her frame, asking my opinion, while I pretended to consider. Inside, I cataloged every laugh, every glance, every little performance she gave. She thought she was winning. He thought he was secure. But I was the one holding all of the cards. The night of the dinner arrived. The room glittered with lights, crystal glasses catching reflections as laughter echoed through the air. My husband stood tall, shaking hands, charming everyone like the golden boy he had always pretended to be. My best friend was there too, dressed elegantly, blending in with the crowd, but always finding ways to hover nearby. I wore a smile that no one questioned, a dress that demanded attention, and a secret that would soon shatter their perfect facade. The speeches began. His father spoke first, then an uncle, then my husband himself, thanking everyone for their support. Applause filled the room, glasses clinked. The air was warm with celebration. And then it was my turn. I stood, holding the USB drive in my hand like a dagger disguised as plastic. "I just want to say a few words," I began, my voice calm, almost trembling with emotion. They thought it was gratitude. They thought I was about to cry tears of joy, but I wasn't. I walked to the projector, my heels striking the floor with steady rhythm. My husband smiled proudly. My best friend clapped softly, her eyes gleaming. And then I inserted the drive. The screen lit up. At first, the crowd was confused. The first screenshot appeared. A simple message: "I can't stop thinking about last night." Gasps rippled through the room. The next appeared, and the next, each more incriminating than the last. His face turned pale. My best friend's smile froze. And I stood tall, silent, watching as the truth tore through their lies like fire through paper. By the time the slideshow ended, the room was in chaos. Whispers, stares, aunts covering their mouths, his parents glaring in shock, my so-called best friend trembling, her eyes darting towards the door like a trapped animal. And me? I finally smiled. Because they hadn't just betrayed me, they had underestimated me. And tonight, everyone would remember who I truly was. Not the broken bride, not the abandoned friend, but the woman who turned betrayal into power. For a moment after the final screenshot faded from the screen, the room was frozen. The glow of the projector flickered against stunned faces. Glasses paused midair, forks left hovering over half-eaten plates. The silence was deafening. Then it erupted. Gasps turned into whispers, whispers into shouts. My husband's aunt clutched her pearls, muttering, "Impossible!" while his uncle hissed curses under his breath. Guests shifted in their seats, some standing to get a better look at the screen, others pulling out their phones, snapping photos before the images disappeared. My husband lunged forward, yanking the USB from the projector, his face a mask of fury and panic. "This is fake!" he roared, waving the drive like a weapon. "She's making this up, editing messages, twisting things." But the damage was done. One of his cousins, a software engineer, called out from the back, "Those aren't fake. Metadata's all there. These are real timestamps." The murmurs rose louder. People nodded, some even glaring at him with disgust. My best friend sat frozen in her chair, her hands trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks. She looked at me once, eyes begging, but I didn't blink, not once. "You planned this?" my husband shouted at me, his voice cracking. "You ruined me in front of my family!" I stepped forward, steady and calm, my voice slicing through the chaos. "No, you ruined yourself. I just showed them who you really are." The crowd murmured in agreement, a ripple of judgment that no denial could silence. My mother-in-law rose slowly, her face pale, her hands shaking as she pointed at her son. "How could you? We trusted you. We welcomed her into this family. And you?" Her voice broke. She sank back into her chair, sobbing softly. My husband's father slammed his fist on the table. "Get out!" he growled. His voice carried the weight of authority that silenced even the loudest whispers. "You've disgraced us." My husband's face twisted, caught between rage and desperation. He turned toward me, his voice dropping to a hiss only I could hear. "You'll pay for this." I met his gaze without fear. "No, you just did." And then the final blow came from my best friend. She stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "It wasn't just him! I wanted him too! She doesn't deserve him! She never did!" The room gasped again. Her confession landed like a grenade, the shockwaves tearing apart the last shreds of her carefully polished mask. Guests stared at her in horror, some even shaking their heads in disbelief. "You sat at my table," one relative spat. "You smiled in her face." "You called yourself her sister," another whispered. Tears streamed down her face, but there was no pity left in the room. She had damned herself with her own words. My husband grabbed her wrist, trying to pull her toward the door. "Let's go," he muttered. But she yanked her hand free, glaring at him through her tears. "Don't you dare leave me to take this alone!" The two of them stood in the center of the chaos, unraveling in real time, their alliance crumbling into bitter accusations. "You promised me!" she screamed. "You ruined everything!" he shouted back. And all the while, I stood tall, silent, letting the spectacle play out. Because there was nothing I could say that would cut deeper than the truth already had. Finally, security staff moved in, guiding them both out as the room buzzed with disbelief. Some guests followed, whispering furiously, while others stayed seated, staring at me as though they weren't sure whether to pity me or admire me. I took a deep breath, raising my glass, my voice calm but firm. "Thank you for seeing the truth tonight. I don't need sympathy, I just needed the lies to end." And with that, I sat down, the storm still raging around me. But inside, I felt lighter than I had in years. They thought they had destroyed me, but in front of everyone, they had destroyed themselves. The morning after the dinner felt strangely quiet, like the world had taken a breath that didn't know how to release. The group chat from his family buzzed, then died. A few aunts sent me private messages with clipped apologies. His mother called and cried without asking anything of me. "You didn't deserve that," she said through the static. And for the first time since the wedding, I let the words rest where they landed. I didn't have to carry them anywhere. He tried first. A text at 7:12 a.m. "We need to talk. You went too far." Then another. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. We can fix this privately." I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then powered the phone off. Fix what? A lie isn't broken when you expose it. It was broken the day it was made. By noon, I'd called an attorney. We spoke in a small office with clean lines and steady light, the kind of space where chaos ran out of excuses. I slid the folder across the desk. She flipped through the printouts, kept her face neutral, and began mapping out angles. Annulment on grounds of fraud, digital evidence preservation, cease and desist if he tried to smear me, a protective order if the messages turned ugly. When she finished, she put down her pen and met my eyes. "You did the hard part," she said. "You told the truth in a room that wanted a story." I nodded, unsure whether I wanted to laugh or sleep for a week. My best friend tried too. Her apology arrived like a performance. "I'm sorry you found out that way. You pushed me away, you know. He understood me." The message was long and oxygenless, more justification than regret. I didn't reply. Some doors shouldn't be closed softly. They should be locked for good, and the key thrown into deep water. The fallout kept moving through circles I couldn't see. His job, HR called about reputation concerns. Her social orbit. Photos disappeared. Captions went vague. Mutual friends choosing sides without saying the quiet part out loud. It all passed by me like a weather report. I logged it, then let it go. My life wasn't going to be built on other people's reactions. At night, when the adrenaline dropped and the apartment went still, my hands would remember the weight of the USB labeled truth. I'd catch myself replaying the moment the screen lit the room, the gasp, the ruptured hush, the look on his face when the mask came off. It would have been easy to build a home in that one scene and live there forever, the victorious version of myself framed forever in cold blue light. But victory without direction is just another trap. It keeps you orbiting the thing that hurt you. I didn't want a shrine to pain. I wanted a door. So I started small. I took my name off joint accounts, returned gifts boxed in silent tissue, canceled the honeymoon we weren't going on, and forwarded the refund to my own savings. I changed the lock screen to something without us in it. A picture of the horizon from a bus window, sky gulping up the road like promise. I made a playlist that wasn't about endings. I said no to explaining myself to people who wanted entertainment more than understanding. A week later, I met his mother for coffee. She arrived with hands that didn't quite know where to rest and eyes that couldn't deny what they'd seen. "I raised him better," she said, voice frayed. I didn't correct her. Love edits memory. I wasn't there to be her editor. She reached across the table and squeezed my fingers. "You deserved a room that defended you," she said. "If I didn't, I'm sorry." That apology didn't fix anything, but it unclenched something old and tired in me. Sometimes closure isn't a door slamming shut. It's a latch you stop holding shut. The legal steps moved forward. My attorney filed for annulment. The clerk stamped dates that turned the mess into sequence. He sent one last message, short, brittle. "You'll regret this." I saved it, forwarded it to my lawyer, and blocked his number. Let the system read what my heart was done translating. As the paperwork found its rhythm, so did I. I went back to work and discovered how good it felt to be valued for the quality of my questions instead of the volume of my silence. I found mornings where the first thing I felt wasn't dread. I bought flowers without needing an occasion, slept diagonally because I could, and cooked for one like it was a feast. Little freedoms, stacked like bricks, build sturdier houses than the palaces people see on Instagram. News of them trickled in whether I wanted it or not. He moved out of his place. She posted a black square about healing and turned off comments. There were rumors of them trying to make something official, then rumors of that collapsing under the weight of surveillance neither of them could survive. Betrayal has no loyalty. It only has appetite. One evening, I took the folder from the shelf and went through page by page. Not to relive it, but to honor the fact that I had, at every step, chosen to face what was true instead of what was pretty. I tucked the papers back in, slid the USB into a smaller envelope, and wrote a single line on the outside. "For when I forget who I am." Then I placed it in the back of a drawer I no longer opened every day. On what would have been our first month mark, I didn't count the days. I met Leia for dinner instead. We talked about work, a book she loved, the shoes I shouldn't buy but would. She raised her glass. "To the day you stopped auditioning for a part in their story." I laughed, an honest sound, light enough to carry. Before bed that night, I stood by the window and watched the city pulse. Trains drawing thin lines of purpose, lives unfolding in rooms I'd never see. For once, I felt part of it, not trapped behind it. The bruise was still there, some aches teach you the weather, but it didn't own the forecast anymore. They thought they'd buried me under the spectacle, the dress, the vows, the dinner, the reveal. They thought I'd become the girl who was wronged and stayed in that sentence forever. But the truth didn't just stop their scene, it started my script. I wasn't the bride they broke, I was the author they created. And from here on, every line had my name on it.